You're from Brooklyn.
Get up a man.
No. But I appreciate it. I've been so excited to have you come here for so long because I don't know, there's just so much buzz around you right now, and in general, people are excited about you, everyone's writing about you, you're doing all these amazing things. You are right now leading, you are one of the impeachment managers, you've been a leader on the January 6th riot committee, so yeah, let's get around your house. So that's a lot about. But first I want to ask you, I want your impressions of San Francisco first. What do you think about our fair town?
It's a great American city. And it's a great American city because, well, in many ways, the first time I was in San Francisco, just the architecture of it, very different than LA, for instance, in Southern California. And I understand the civil rivalry there. But it felt more at home for me. The architecture and the environment and the energy and the diversity as compared to the more distant nature of, sort of how Southern California is laid out. And that was my first reaction, when I came to San Francisco. And then, of course, the vibrancy of it and the great history of, sort of progressive struggle as it relates to the LGBTQ community, but beyond. It's also something that has a great energy to it that I've always been drawn to.
Okay.
And of course, it's the home of Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. Nancy Pelosi. She's actually very present in the district. A lot of people, you think that as speaker, she wouldn't be around, but she's constantly hosting town halls. She's in and around town. She's doing things. Brooklyn and San Francisco. I mean, are they very different? I mean, can you compare them? What are some similarities? We have Brooklynites in the house? Yes? I love that. My mother's from Flatbush, so I claim a little piece of Brooklyn in me. There you go, the pushy side, the more pushy version of me. I blame my Brooklynite mother for. But can you compare Brooklyn and San Francisco, kind of hoopsicles and popsicles?
First of all, I would like to say that half the world was either born in Brooklyn or conceived there. It's very interesting because I think a significant number of Americans can actually trace their roots to Brooklyn because of its immigrant, foundation, and then people coming, pursuing the great American dream in a place like Brooklyn, and then spanning out to other parts of the country. And in some ways, San Francisco is very similar, right? A different immigrant experience, but similarly one that is as powerful and as important. And I think the district that I represent, for instance, is an incredibly diverse district in the same way that San Francisco, incredibly diverse city, dealing with challenges, San Francisco, right? Housing displacement and gentrification and the intensity and what that means and how do you preserve artistic diversity and diversity in every way possible. It's the same challenges that we're dealing with. But I think foundationally a recognition in both places that our diversity is a strength, it's not a weakness. The great John Lewis would say to us often that we may have come over on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. And I think that is, recognition of that is strong in both places.
I love that. I haven't thought about it like that, and that's wonderful. I'm going to Brooklyn tomorrow, so maybe I'll see you there. Which brings me to time. I think a lot of folks, you read about someone like you this week in the Atlantic, I think, and in general, you read about House leadership. But do you mind just helping folks understand, like, what do you do exactly? I mean, like, can you help for those folks in the audience that haven't actually met an elected official, like, how do you decide what your stance on a vote is going to be? Being in House leadership, does that mean you're helping inform what big packages get put to a vote? Can you give us a little sense of what's a day or a week in the life of Hakeem Jeffries like?
Well, as a member of Congress, first and foremost, I think your principal responsibility is to represent your constituents at home. And the great beauty of the House is that you have 435 members who are sent from very different districts across the country to come to Washington to try to forcefully be the voice for the people you are privileged to serve, while at the same time trying to find the highest common denominator to get things done. Particularly from my vantage point, on behalf of the most vulnerable amongst us in society, you know, the least, the lost, and the left behind, working families, middle class folks, those who aspire to be part of the middle class, the poor, the sick, the afflicted. But being a member of the House, I think primarily you've got a responsibility to try to help others to the best of your ability, and there are people who are counting on you on the ground to solve real-time problems for them. And I take great pride in that, and that kind of on-the-ground work and on-the-ground presence, while at the same time trying to channel these big policy discussions that we're having in a way that that eventually gets things over the finish line that decisively make a difference in the quality of life of the American people. It's good to be in a position now where we can play some offense, because the last 4 years prior to this year,
Not so fun.
it was intense. We were playing defense, and thankfully we were able to get through Trump. We're still dealing with Trumpism, and we came very close to losing our democracy. And you know, it's extraordinary. I was actually on the floor that day, and we were debating the objections to Arizona. That was the first state. And I'll never forget, you know, seeing Speaker Pelosi was actually presiding over the debate, and she gets removed from the rostrum, you know, in a fashion that it was clear there was an emergency that was taking place. And then the number 2 and the number 3 Democrat, Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn, they were seated right where I was seated, and then their security detail comes to get them. And security detail for Clyburn says, "Sir, we have to leave now." And then the sergeant at arms who interrupted the debate says that the mob has breached the Capitol. They're a few feet from the chamber. Be prepared to hit the ground and secure the gas masks that are underneath your seats. Now, I've been in Congress at that point for 8 years. I didn't know there was gas masks underneath the chamber. Now, as Manny mentioned, having the privilege of being in leadership as a number 5 Democrat, chair of the House Democratic Caucus, I see Pelosi removed, right? Appropriately so, because they were there in part to assassinate our speaker. And she's the most recognizable member of the Capitol. But I see the speaker removed, number 1, Steny Hoyer, number 2, Clyburn, number 3. I gotta be honest, y'all. I was waiting for somebody to come get me. I'm number 5, and I'm like, we going in chronological order. And they never showed up. They never showed up. But so we were there though, thankfully, and they secured a pathway for us to leave. And you know, Liz Cheney at the time, who knew she would emerge as such a hero in this space. At the time, she held the equivalent Republican position, right? She was chair of the House Republican Conference. So McCarthy had been removed similarly, or he wasn't even there at that point. Scalise, who's number 2 Republican, had been removed. I see Liz, and I'm there with everybody else. I said, Liz, I guess we know where the leadership line of expendability is right here. But even at that moment, tell that she felt that this was a situation that needed to be dealt with. and we came very close to losing our democracy. But thankfully, we were committed to going back to the floor, completing our work, certify the election to ensure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be the president and vice president.
That story, it just reminded me of how exhausting politics has been over the last, the kind of the shock of it all, and kind of, I couldn't think of a more shocking way to end Trump's time in office than with that. But we were talking to our team earlier about 2022, and one of the questions they wanted to ask you is just about how are we going to overcome this feeling of maybe exhaustion, over itness, to not be super articulate. You know, we had our candidate lost, and we had 4 years of Trump, which was like constantly being on defense, as you said. And then he wins, but the election takes a week to get called, and then people don't believe it. And then we do win, but then we don't know if the Senate is going to be ours because there's 2 special elections. And then we win the special elections, but by like thousands of votes. And then the day that the special elections are called, the morning, we have this, you know, riot in the Capitol, and our democracy is upended and almost destroyed. And it's like, how do you come out of that and you're like, you know what, I want to get involved in 2022. let's do some political work. What do you say to those people? And there's a lot of them who are like, I'm over it. That was way too much.
It's a great question, and there's understandable exhaustion. Even that period of time, we started the year, it was Insurrection Wednesday, right? That was the 6th. Then Impeachment Wednesday, that was the 13th. And then Inauguration Wednesday, that was the 20th. That's a positive trajectory. It's an understated way of saying it, but that was a 2-week period of time in and of itself that was exhausting. And you just laid out sort of what we had all been through, but the country is worth fighting for. And the challenge is that the other side, the Mitch McConnells of the world, I believe, you know, they will continue to proceed with diabolical intensity to either maintain the status quo or roll back all of the gains that have been made to try to make America the best that it can possibly be. Diabolical intensity, dreaming up scheme after scheme after scheme to artificially maintain power and maintain the status quo. And that's just the reality of what we confront. And we have to match and exceed that level of effort with righteous intensity, or we can lose. We're not a perfect country. There's a lot that needs to be done, but a lot of progress has been made, but all of that progress is being threatened. And typically in midterm elections, the Democrats, at least, after having had success, saw this with Bill Clinton in '92, we saw this with Barack Obama in 2008, feel as though the job is done. The other side keeps going. And they keep going because they know if they take back the House or take back the Senate, they can short circuit the presidency and short circuit the progress that otherwise might be made. And that's not to say, and I don't want to be naive about the fact that people understandably are feeling fatigued and exhausted by it all. But as Joe Biden said during the inauguration, that third Wednesday, the 3 Eyes of January, that third Wednesday, that America's had a lot of challenges. We've had a lot of trauma and tough spots before, but just enough of us have always come together to get through a tough moment and to keep the country moving forward. I thought that was the most underappreciated thing that he said, because that's true. It's never everyone. It's always just enough of us through all of the trials and tribulations of the American journey. who at a given moment in time have come together. And it's gonna fall on just enough of us, as we did in 2000, to try to make sure we hold the House and hold the Senate so we can keep this transformative progress that we have an opportunity to undertake going forward.
So raise your hand if you're going to be part of the just enough of us. I expect to see every damn hand. I'm going to look around the room. Good. Chessa? Good. You too. How do you turn it off? Like, how do you turn off Chairman Jeffries, Congressman Jeffries? Like, how do you not turn into someone who is always an elected official, especially in leadership, especially someone who's holding the burden of the party on their shoulders? What do you do to like shed the layers, and how often are you able to do it?
Well, you know, I think whenever I feel like I need an escape, I always take it back to mid-90s, early 2000s hip hop music.
You have to go all the way back to the 90s?
Yeah,
That's a long time.
It's kind of my
It's
era.
2021.
I'm dating myself. It's kind of my era, but you know, Biggie Smalls, Jay-Z, aren't these classic artists?
Yes.
So that's always an escape, but then you know I'll move forward as best I can into modern music. But music is kind of like a soundtrack for everyone's journey in life, and can capture the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the peaks and the valleys. And so leaning on music for me to recharge the batteries, not just 90s classic golden age hip hop, but that was and still is important to me. It's always been a great escape.
And are you like one of those people that has like obsessively organized Spotify playlists, or do you just have like songs? Are you listening to your Discover Weekly, or how are you? If I were to steal your phone right now, your Spotify, what would I find? I'm not gonna steal. If you had lent me your phone,
I've got some Spotify playlists that are out there, but it's more Pandora channels actually.
Okay, all right. So a true explorer.
My day is that my
You are.
day? When I say that?
There were a couple people that were like,
Like I'm referencing like MySpace.
I think spas use Pandora. Like to set the mood for like a couple hours. Were you wearing a seersucker suit on January 6th? Did I hear that right?
Not on January 6th, but
There was a story you were wearing a seersucker suit. You and Colin Allred were like doing something.
Well, right. So that
Is there photographic evidence of this seersucker suit somewhere?
There is photographic evidence, but in Congress, in the House, we actually have seersucker Wednesday.
Every Wednesday?
Every Wednesday between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So you'll see members on both sides of the aisle, men and women, wearing seersucker suits. And in the Senate, seersucker Thursday.
What is that? That is so, and you're into it. You love it. It's tradition.
It's kind of, it's tradition. It probably goes back decades.
I should have a whole nother conversation just
But with the Colin Allred thing, Colin Allred is a great member from Texas, from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right? So Colin, that story also, it related to January 6th. And January 6th, I was in a traditional blue suit. But so as chaos was breaking out in the chamber, Colin he was seated immediately behind me. And when the sergeant at arms says, be prepared to hit the ground with the gas mask on, and we could hear the banging on the House chamber. Now, Colin Allred says to me, I don't know about you, Hakeem, but I'm not going out without a fight. The thing about Colin is that in his second term, before Colin got to Congress, he was a civil rights attorney, the Obama administration. But before he was a civil rights attorney, he played linebacker in the NFL for the Tennessee Titans for 5 years. And if you ever find yourself in the middle of a violent insurrection, it's good to have an NFL linebacker who's got your back. And so when he said it, I know that he meant it. See it in his eyes. And his jacket came off, and my jacket came off. Sean Patrick Maloney's jacket came off.
Ooh, now I'm interested. Now you have my attention.
Yeah. We actually thought we were going to have to fight for our lives, right?
Yeah.
And thankfully, they found an escape route.
So for some reason, I thought that you were wearing a seersucker suit when that whole thing was happening, and I had an whole image in my head. To bring this to a little more serious note, you tweeted. I don't really use Twitter, but I was alerted to this tweet. You tweeted that somehow America must remain a beacon of light and source of strength for the world's most vulnerable citizens. That was your tweet in response to a lot of things that were happening in Afghanistan over the last 5 days. I thought that was so beautiful and poetic and hard. You know, I'm Afghan. My father's from Afghanistan. And I'm sure for many of us watching everything happen and happening right now on our TV screens has been difficult, to say the least. Your tweet about somehow America must remain a beacon of light. I guess my question to you as a leader in our country and in our party, how can we do that?
Yeah, it was, I felt at that moment, I think like many Americans felt, as you're watching just the imagery of Taliban sort of taking hold of the country. And I've been to Afghanistan before with the speaker. And I remember I was in that presidential palace meeting with the former president and seeing the images of Taliban fighters there was just jarring. But it doesn't compare to the realities on the ground that the Afghan people are confronting. Women and children and interpreters and others whose very life, not just livelihood, is at risk. And at the same time, the situation was unfolding in Haiti with the earthquake. And I mean, just what Haiti has had to endure year after year, decade after decade, century after century is just extraordinary. And again, tragedy strikes Haiti. And America can't do everything, and certainly we can't be the policemen and women of the world. And I support the notion that we need to withdraw from Afghanistan. But I also, at the same time, believe that we do have to be a beacon of hope and a source of strength if we truly are going to live out the words leader of the free world. And we just have to find a way to leave no one behind. I think what it looks like immediately is making sure that the evacuation is comprehensive, is orderly, and is executed with a degree of professionalism, safety and security, that every vulnerable person who is there, citizen or not, we're able to evacuate them and put them into a better place. And we also can figure out how we can support the democratic aspirations of Afghan civil society, separate and apart from subsequent military intervention, but to undergird them so that they know that the American people are going to stand behind them. And I don't have every answer, but it was a sentiment that I was feeling, and just felt compelled to share it. And now go back to Washington to try to bring it to life.
I'm very warm and fuzzy sitting next to you. I don't know. I feel like, well, maybe it's just the heat in here. is hot. So you're optimistic though. You think that we can continue to be a beacon of light and source of strength. And from what I'm hearing, let's get this done. Let's fix this mistake that we're in right now. Let's get our people in. Let's get the people that helped us to safety. But when you think about the past 20 years of our foreign policy in the future, you feel like there's a path forward where we can reclaim that being the leader of the free world.
Yeah, I think we have to reclaim that mantle.
Yeah.
Not the policeman of the world, but the leader of the free world. I also think that, you know, the vision that existed for the United Nations, something that we need to really think about, how we truly bring it to life, right? Because the United Nations really should be an institution that the world can get behind, that can then get involved and engaged in places like Afghanistan and Haiti to turn around what appear to be intractable situations. America's going to have to lead that effort even within the context of the United Nations. But other countries need to be involved as well. And, you know, so we're going to have some serious conversations about it, but we can't solve every problem in the world. But I think we have to be the most constructive, positive force that we can possibly be, leading and bringing others along with us.
Amazing. I'm only going to ask you a couple more questions, and instead of doing audience questions, I want to give more time for you all to actually meet him yourself, maybe take a picture, and actually shake his hand, get to know this man who I know is kind of like, this is someone from the other side of the country. Who is this? A New Yorker. So I actually want to, if that's okay with you, Hakeem, just ask you a couple more questions and then try to use the remaining time that we have with you tonight to actually meet some folks in the public. The Roaring 20s, what happened?
In New York?
No, in the country. Are you, I want to ask you, like, are you feeling, how are you dealing with this whole, like, we were supposed to have this hot girl summer and now we're not, like, personally, how are you dealing with it? Because as an elected official, being in politics over the last year, I'm sure has been very stressful, but also, New York is their homecoming week this week.
Yeah.
That is why I'm going tomorrow, because it's been my dream to hear Paul Simon on the Great Lawn in Central Park ever since they did that concert in 1982, which I was not alive for. So I'm going there to hear it, but it's also kind of a bit of a bummer. So how are you dealing with that, and how's New York dealing with that?
First of all, I think the concert is going to be lit. Did I use that correctly?
You did.
Kids check it.
Did you find that on Pandora?
Yeah. Urban Dictionary. Well, my kids actually keep me fairly up to date on these things. But I do think that the concert's going to be a great thing. But the pandemic's not going to be over for any of us until it's over for all of us. And it's unfortunate that we're seeing such irresponsible behavior by Republican governors and elected officials across the country who politicize public health measures that are reasonable for all of us to be taking. And it's a shameful thing to see. And it's one of the toxic consequences of Trumpism that continues to remain with us. That said, I think the president has done an extraordinary job in this particular area and in a whole host of other areas, but in helping to try to lead us through the pandemic. We're going to continue to support him. From the very beginning, Speaker Pelosi has been very clear that our primary objectives are to crush the virus and to continue to provide direct relief and assistance to everyday Americans who are struggling until we get through this, and to make sure that we build back better. And when the then candidate Biden said that, I thought it was such an important moment, because it wasn't just a slogan that he articulated on the campaign trail, but it was a narrative to capture what we needed to do as Americans. We can't return to pre-pandemic normal, because prior to the pandemic, half the American people, made clear they couldn't afford a sudden, unexpected $400 expense. Half the American people in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and our young people saddled with debt, unable to have the same opportunities to pursue the great American middle class dream and beyond that their parents and grandparents had. Can't return back to that. Systemic racism that continues to be in the soil of America, we can't return back to that. And so I think I'm hopeful that we've got a president and governing majorities in the House and the Senate who realize that, yes, we have to decisively crush the virus, and it's going to take a little longer than we thought. But what should give us optimism is the notion that we're committed to building a better society and emerging from this crisis in a way that continues this country's long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect future.
You. You are so great. Let's go to something optimistic and wonderful, shall we? Some legislative achievements, not on your chamber just quite yet, but the Senate passed the infrastructure bill and that mama budget bill, right? That's exciting. Come on, clap for that. We're not able to like celebrate a big legislative achievement out of a chamber of Congress that, you know, our party has wanted for a long time. And so for those in the audience that don't really know what's happening, I'm not asking for a breakdown of the bill, but we know we have an infrastructure bill. We know we have a very large budget bill. It's coming to your chamber, right? Soon. And then you guys are gonna hash it out.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Well, so we're going back into session next Monday.
After the lit concert. In New York.
What I got from Petro. So we're going back on Monday, which is unexpected, but the Speaker appropriately called us back to set us on a path where we can eventually get the infrastructure bill over the finish line. But as significant, the 3.5 budget reconciliation bill that completes what President Biden said we need to do, which is the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. And investing in our crumbling infrastructure is important, our bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, mass transit system. We need to do all of that. But that's not all we need to do, right? We have an existential crisis that we confront in terms of climate change. And there is no planet B. There is no other option other than dealing with this. Building a sustainable, resilient, green economy is going to be critical. That's not really part of the infrastructure bill. That will be part of the budget reconciliation bill. Investing in a caring economy, investing in child care and home care and health care and long-term care and senior care, both in terms of creating those opportunities for employment in a dignified way. Most of the jobs that come out of infrastructure traditionally, right, physical infrastructure, those are male-dominated jobs. We're starting to see some diversification. Much more needs to be done in that area. But we know that this has been a recession that has fallen disproportionately on low-income communities, communities of color, and women. And so we need to be intentional in how we respond in that way. That's why investing in a caring economy, broadly defined, and empowering America's women to be able to pursue and utilize their talents and abilities in every way possible, I think is going to be critical. And that will be a large part of the budget reconciliation bill. So we'll set that in motion. And then lastly, we're also, I'm very proud of this, we are going to go back so that we can pass the John Robert Lewis voting rights. the era of voter suppression in this country once and for all.
Yeah. Optimistic about getting these things passed. Things gonna happen.
We're gonna do it. Definitely gonna get it done in the House. We gotta deal with some dynamics in the other chamber.
How do you feel about them in general, just between us? You like them? Do they talk too much?
It's off the record.
Just off the record, just as chickens. Like, do they frustrate you a little bit?
The House has a role and the Senate has a role, right? That's what I can say. And the House's role, right? We were designed to be the institution closest to the people, right? And reflect the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the fears, the concerns, in the words of the framers, the passions of the American people. And that's why we only have 2-year terms, as opposed to the 4-year term of the presidency, the 6-year term of the Senate, the life tenure of the Supreme Court, right? Wow. There's a reason for that, because we were meant to be the institution closest to the people, all 435 of us up at the same time. And to be able to move things with haste. The Senate, by design, was supposed to be an institution, in the words of the framers, that would cool the passions of the House to try to arrive at the best possible legislative product. And so, you know, I think if that, you know, we're two different institutions. Sometimes we affectionately refer to the Senate as the House of Lords. But they were designed to be a different institution. We don't have a unicameral legislature, right? We have 2 different houses of Congress. And I respect the Senate's role, though I do believe that something needs to be done about the filibuster. And if you can't get rid of it altogether, even though it's a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, the least that can be done is to create an additional exception for democracy and voting rights. And one of the things that I think you'll hear us say with increasing intensity is that there are already exceptions that exist to the filibuster. Reconciliation, right? Budget reconciliation, that's an exception. Doesn't require 60 votes, it requires 50 plus 1. And the Republicans used reconciliation in 2017 twice. Once to try to take away health care from all of you, and then a second time to pass the GOP tax scam, which they successfully did through an exception to the filibuster, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1% to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless and saddle us with $2 trillion worth of debt. That's an exception to the filibuster. There's another exception that Mitch McConnell, self-described Grim Reaper, Dr. No, Darth Vader.
You know what you need to do? Have you ever heard of RuPaul's reading challenge? Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's this thing that usually happens at the beginning of a season of RuPaul's Drag Race, where she has all the drag queens get in line and read each other, basically like diss each other.
Yeah.
They diss the other drag queens, and the person who does it the best wins. It's called a mini challenge. And I just think that you should enter that because you could read some of those drag queens for film. Using I'm just saying, like in a future career, you could do that.
Life after Congress.
Yeah.
But, so, just to
Sorry, back to you.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate you're welcome for the idea.
But yeah, keep coming. That Mitch McConnell used the Supreme Court justice exception to the filibuster that he created to steal not 1, but 2 Supreme Court justices. Yeah. One from President Obama and one from President Biden. And so all we're simply saying is, if they can use existing exceptions to the filibuster to steal Supreme Court justices and to jam a GOP tax scam down the throats of the American people, certainly we can create an exception for democracy.
So instead of asking me the last question, I actually wanted to put someone on the spot who just walked in the room, who maybe doesn't want to be put on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway. We just were given a new Secretary of State here in California, an incredible woman who is actually going to be following, not following you, but the next person to sit in this chair. And she's incredible. You know, she got a PhD at 26 years old. Yeah, I can't do that. And I wanted to ask Secretary Weber if you wanted to ask something of the chairman, since you're here and he's here, instead of me yapping, is there anything you wanted to ask him in front of this crowd of folks? Person to person? Leader to leader?
I assume you all have considered the idea that that voting is the right of every citizen, and that this nation was founded on the principle that no taxation without representation, since we all pay the same federal taxes. Could we not have standards for voting that are federal standards? That I shouldn't have to live in California and be an ex-offender and have an opportunity to vote, but not somewhere else? Have you thought of that? Have you guys been working on that and pushing it as really the crux of this foundation of this democracy?
Thank you, Secretary Weber. Stay here in 15 minutes and you will hear from her. So she is someone not to miss. So stay here 15 minutes. Please.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Madam Secretary. See that appointment, when we saw it in Washington, D.C., both the CBC and the House Democratic Caucus, and we really going to do a great job here in that capacity, and was a fierce progressive advocate prior to that in the legislature. I think you're absolutely right that, I mean, the way we've seen voting rights unfold, the Republicans have clearly undertaken a deliberate strategy and adopted voter suppression as an electoral tactic. And in fact, you got three things going on at the same time: unregulated money, intense partisan gerrymandering, voter suppression. It's a diabolical trifecta, because they've abandoned the notion that they can win elections based on ideas in large measure. So we're going to have to deal with all of them. And HR 1 is a part of that effort to comprehensively, the For the People Act, deal with our broken democracy in every possible area. The voting aspect of it, we hope to be able to deal with through the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which we'll take up next week, which will involve both repairing the damage that the Supreme Court did to the 1965 Voting Rights Act in their Shelby County versus Holder decision in 2013, and bringing in some of the standards for voting around access, to mail-in ballots, automatic registration, adequate polling sites, early voting as a uniform capacity. Those are all things that are in HR 1 that we hope to bring into the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that we should be able to agree to, not as Democrats and Republicans, but as Americans. And in the aftermath of 1965, voting rights in America was kind of largely a settled matter for a significant period of time. In fact, the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized into law on 4 different occasions. And every time it was reauthorized, it was signed into law by a Republican president. 1970, Richard Nixon. 1975, Gerald Ford. 1982, Ronald Reagan. And 2006, George W. Bush. Every single time it was reauthorized and signed back into law was a Republican president with bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate. Voting rights was a settled matter. And then someone got elected in 2008. That's the only thing that I can point to that changed the trajectory of voting rights in America. Because often in America, you make progress, it's always followed by a backlash. And the election of Barack Obama was tremendous progress, but in the same way that when progress had been made in the past, the progress of emancipation and the Reconstruction Amendments, followed by the backlash of the rise of Jim Crow and the Black Codes and lynching and the KKK. Well, the progress of the Civil Rights Movement, followed by the backlash of the election of Richard Nixon and anti-busing, anti-affirmative action, anti-government rhetoric and policies, then followed by the rise of mass incarceration 50 years ago in 1971, when there were less than 300,000 people incarcerated in America. Today, 2.2 million, disproportionately Black and Latino, many of them nonviolent drug offenders of every race. Progress followed by backlash. The progress of Barack Obama's election, followed by the backlash of the Tea Party revolution, the Supreme Court striking down large parts of the Voting Rights Act in 2013, and then ultimately the election of so-and-so in 2016. Riding into the White House, the racist lie that he perpetrated for 5 years that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States of America, to try to delegitimize it. Progress followed by backlash. But here's the hope. Every time we've been in the midst of a backlash moment in America, just enough of us come together to get us out of it and continues this country's great march toward a more perfect union. And that's exactly what we're going to do this time as well.
That's right. Well, Hakeem Jeffries, Chairman. Thank you for spending some time on this couch, on these chairs with me and with all of us tonight. 3 quick plugs. The most important plug is September 14th. Hakeem's coming back. We're going to be doing a fundraiser for him. It'll be a very accessible fundraiser for everyone. But one of the things that we can do in the Bay Area is we can financially support leaders in our party from all over the country. And one of the things that we're doing at Manny's, as we've done for the last few years, is giving you the opportunity to do just that. It's a very empowering thing to be able to be a part of someone's story and propel them forward. And so I'm very proud to be in the Bay Area where we can actually financially support a lot of these folks. And so we're going to be giving you the opportunity to do that for Hakeem on September 14th. And I fully expect every single one of you to be there. Number 1. Number 2, in 10 minutes now, Secretary Weber will be joining us, and we're going to be having a conversation with her, our new Secretary of State, on voting in America, voting in this state, the recall election, and her story, which is incredible. So stick around, don't leave, for that next talk tonight. And then the third event is on Wednesday. Senator Raphael Warnock is coming. Senator Warnock in this space have a very close relationship. We've done a lot of events with him, for him. Some of you have participated. I actually got to spend election night in Georgia with him and his staff. He's an amazing man. We really only have about 5 spots left for that event. It's very, very well packed. We're going to be taking up the whole space for it. So if you'd like to participate in that, you can find me afterwards. You can also you can't find it on our website. Find Precious. Where's Precious? Right over here, our Director of Programming, Precious Green. You can find her or myself, and we can get you set up for that. So Secretary Weber, Senator Warnock, Chairman Jeffries, thank you so much for doing this tonight. Quick couple thank yous. Thank you to Ram for running the Zoom, our head of operations, and Tomas is somewhere. Thank you, Tomas. Our team. And then thank you, Precious, as well, for being our director of programming. We had Jenna in the front and Lisa, and I forget who else was serving at the front, but please thank them. Who was it? Salem. Thank you to Salem and Jenna for any of you that purchase drinks or food and supporting our nonprofit restaurant here at Farm of Hope. We'll see you at the concert. Maybe.
Still be in the Bay Area.
Okay, so I will do a dance for you. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. Let's give one last round of applause.